Good morning. Today we will begin our celebration of Guy with a processional of our Jewish war veterans. Please rise and remain standing for the national anthem.
Present arms. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, arms.
Good morning. How do you pay tribute to Guy Stern in 1 hour? How do we teach about the Holocaust in 1 hour? We tell a story. We show a picture and we look deeply, and we begin to understand the magnificence of a life. Then we retell those stories and we talk about the lessons, and the memories live on within each of us. I met Guy Stern in the last decade of his life. Actually, I had no idea who he was, but I was attracted to his smile, his voice, and his love of life. At 90, he was our scholar in residence at the Holocaust Center, always available to speak to students as a witness to history. He wrote articles, he was an amazing storyteller, he mentored our staff, he delivered lectures all around the world, and he was a piece of living history. And boy, was he fun to be with. But as I got to know Guy, I also saw a hole in his life that could never be filled. The loss of family at such a young age was always with him. My mother used to tell me, friends are the family you choose. Each of you were Guy's family. You listened to his stories, you shared in his escapades all around the world, you talked about the past, you planned for a better future, and you gave Guy unconditional love. He gave us so much more in return. Guy was our teacher, and he showed us how to defy hate with humanity. He acted as our guide, and he took on the enormous task of bearing witness. Guy will continue to live in our museum. His voice will be heard in our exhibits and throughout our walls. I would like to thank each of you for being with us in this center this morning, and to those of you on Zoom. Thank you to the Holocaust Center staff and all of our speakers who work with such care and honor to honor Guy with this program this morning. And most of all, thank you to everyone who will continue Guy's legacy. Guy's relationship with the Holocaust Center began in 2004 when Rabbi Charles Rosenzweig invited him to join the board and then to become the director of the Harry and Wanda Zeckelman Institute of the Righteous. Guy's charge was to explore motivations for altruistic actions. In 2008, Rabbi Rosenzweig unexpectedly passed away, and Guy agreed to be interim director for 10 months. Guy was not prepared for what followed. Meeting other survivors and their families, hearing survivor stories, and spending time in our archives, Guy could not suppress the thoughts of his own family. It was emotionally a very hard time for Guy. When Stephen Goldman, the next director, was hired, Guy happily returned to his scholarly work on altruism. Guy was busy. He traveled and lectured everywhere and all around the world. And on one trip to Europe, he found a boxcar, and he negotiated to bring it to our museum. But Guy could never figure out the fates of his parents, his brother Werner and his sister Eleanor. Nor could he understand his own rescue and how he was able to come to America. 14 years ago, when the Ritchie Boys exhibit was being curated, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum came across a document that labeled Guy as one of the 1,000 children. From our archivist, Fega Weiss, Guy learned that a group of Jewish women banded together in 1933 under the label of the German Jewish Aid Society. They pledged to rescue at least 100 children from Germany and Austria. By the end of the war, they had rescued 1,400 children. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the United States State Department at this time, and this story was not told. This became the story of Guy's rescue. Guy's 50-page file was then found at YIVO in New York, and Guy learned that his father had petitioned the Jewish Women's Committee in Berlin, who then worked with the women in New York. They collaborated with the Jewish Women's Group in St. Louis and with Guy's uncle Benno, who was living there. A social worker in St. Louis was the heroine. Guy was 3 months shy of 16 years old, the upper limits of age to be one of these children. This lady broke every rule to hasten the process to bring Günther to America. Guy writes in his book, Invisible Ink, I feel unending gratitude to a largely unrecognized group of American Jewish women who saw to it that Günther Stern took a boat to a harbor in New Jersey rather than a cattle car to Auschwitz. In a quiet moment in Guy's office about 3 years ago, Guy and I were talking about family losses. And he said to me, you know, Cheryl, I think that my parents would be very proud of the person I became. And then we hugged. Raised in an Orthodox home in Hildesheim, Germany, Guy's love of Judaism and the Jewish people were always part of his soul. From his parents, Guy learned tenderness, the love of family, and the joy of learning. In Detroit, Rabbi Mike Moskowitz was his rabbi, and I would like to invite Mike to the podium, I was going to say beam up, but to the podium, to share stories about his good friend, Guy. Rabbi?
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you to Gabby Berman for, I know, doing so much behind-the-scenes organization and making sure I got here on time, too. These words were shared on December 8th at the Great Lakes National Cemetery as our friend and teacher and inspiration, Dr. Guy Stern, was laid to rest. And I was asked to, again, share them today. We gathered then on the first day of Hanukkah, the beginning of our holiday in which we are privileged to commemorate so much in our lives, our very existence as a Jewish people, that we overcame a tyrant who wanted to eliminate our presence in Jerusalem and this world. We honor the miracle of this reality that somehow, as a small group of Israelites, we found a way not only to survive, but to thrive. And of course, we remember the miracle of the oil. And for us now, how we're reminded our ancestors found a way, literally, to bring more light into this world. My colleague and mentor, Rabbi Daniel Schwartz of blessed memory, who was also a friend to Guy and who first brought Guy into my life, taught us that for God, there is no such thing as coincidence. So the fact that we gathered to honor and remembered Guy Stern on Hanukkah, that he took his last breath right before we were to begin celebrating this holiday, was not coincidental. For his life is a testament to this holiday story. Guy didn't merely survive, but in his life and all his years, he filled his days with purpose. His teaching, it gave meaning to so many others. And yes, most definitely, he did bring light into our world. Guy Stern was a gift. So much that made him who he was, it was innate and natural. But with his charismatic presence, he made this all flourish. He drew people in with that smile. Irresistible, one could not fall in love with him and be enveloped in his joy when that smile radiated from him. His melodic and deep voice with a warmth and resonance that could excite and calm almost simultaneously. He knew he was intelligent, comprehending seemingly everything, that steel-trap mind that contained such details, yet sharing only to illuminate or to shed light on a discussion, never to elevate himself haughtily, but you knew he knew. Still in sharing and conversation, so often this level of self-deprecation, lifting you up, making you feel special, it is not an exaggeration to admit that one of the greatest honors bestowed upon me is that Dr. Guy Stern called me his rabbi. He'd introduced me that way, would share that with others, and it humbled me. Guy knew how to listen. In conversation, connect with you. He'd hear what made you tick, your experiences, your interests. Those who worked with him so often saw this reality. I loved hearing stories from those who worked with him here at the Holocaust Memorial Center, how connected many felt, those he had known for decades, and those who he only had the privilege in his last years. The connections were genuine and sincere. He would find in us what was relatable, uniting us. "Oh, you're from St. Louis," he'd said to me. He loved to discuss his early years there, knowing his rabbi's connection to that city that welcomed him to America in 1937. I can envision him proudly wearing that St. Louis Browns baseball jacket. Or then he'd say, or it would be Cincinnati, where we rabbis studied at Hebrew Union College, across the street from University of Cincinnati, one of the many universities where Guy had been a professor. He knew all of my professors, Could go on about his time with them decades ago and their scholarship as well as their foibles. Yes, that mind contained so much. His intellect had the capacity to grasp such a panoply of different interests. A conversation could turn to an opera, and not just the beauty of its music, but the meaning of the libretto and the intent of its creator. Likewise with classical music, and of course with literature. But if it were your fancy, he easily could talk sports with you. How much joy he found these last years in finding he could watch European soccer broadcast on television. Guy made so much of his life. The magnitude of his accomplishments are remarkable. Yes, a distinguished professor emeritus in the Department of Classical and Modern Languages and Literatures and Cultures at Wayne State University. The director of the Institute of the Righteous here at the Holocaust Memorial Center. But how many professorial positions over the years, how many published scholarly papers and books, of course, how many honors bestowed upon him, from the Bronze Star awarded for exceptional service and innovation of successful interrogation techniques. In other words, his illustrious acting career as a Russian general. You know that story. To the Goethe Medal of Germany and even the Legion of Honor in France bestowed upon him right here. Yes, Guy made so much of his life. He was fortunate to have his health to live nearly to 102. But it was more than that, of course. He was extremely ambitious, impressively insightful, burned with passion for the academic field, all coupled with a relentless work ethic, and we found a man making the most of opportunities afforded to him. But there was more. That passion, that need to work so hard, it was driven by his need to make the most of his life. Nothing could be wasted. The only one of his family to survive the nightmares of the Holocaust. Having been sent by his parents from Hildesheim as a young teen, leaving them and his brother and sister, he could never take the reality of his surviving lightly or for granted. He had to make an impact in this world. He had to leave a legacy. And that guy did. But it didn't take away the pain that still remained with him. The realities of what his family, of what so many families experienced and lost in the Shoah. I don't think I ever appreciated the depth of those memories and how they were always present with him before 2 or so years ago. When Guy came to see me prior to having surgery and shared with me his father's physical challenges, and now with some of the same issues that he could not imagine how his father had endured those ailments when he had been taken from his home and transported in a rail car to a concentration camp. That reality, those thoughts were always with him. Yet this didn't necessarily make him bitter, rather it gave him purpose. Not only to create meaning in life, but to bring kindness into our world. How often he'd lecture about altruism, not merely the need for this, but what drives an individual to be led by such goodness. Is it inherent, he'd ask? Do we develop a desire to pursue doing for others? These discussions were endless, as it was so important to him. Because despite the atrocities he knew of and witnessed, he still believed in the altruistic spirit within humanity. One would think that with all the decades under his belt, Guy would have accumulated enough friends and acquaintances in life who could have time for more. But not our Dr. Stern. Accepting and welcoming, always room for new conversations, new people with whom to connect, and how special to reconnect with those he shared similar experiences with, whether it was finding the meaning in his life in the military as one of the Ritchie boys. By no means was it for his own fanfare. Rather, it was the connections. It was the recognition of what had transpired. During that interview for 60 Minutes, when he was called a hero, he interjected saying, no, those who stormed the beaches on D-Day, they are the heroes. But the connections to veterans these last decades, it meant so much to him. There was an immediate bond as with no one else. The relationships felt very good to him, for him, and they were important to him. And why it meant so much that the VA hospital in Ann Arbor named the Guy Stern Welcome Center in his honor. Truth is, though, none of it would have been possible without Susanna. Your presence in Guy's life, or as he would say, his beschert. I know you're watching this celebration, Susanna, that you are with us right now. Literally, you made his life possible, not just in facilitating so much for him, all of his travels. Even one just 2 years ago returned to Berlin with 5 other honored veterans to help tell their story. Yes, one of the many travels, how many trips to Europe for lectures and teaching opportunities, but literally, Susanna, you gave him life, okay? You saved his life a few times too. But your commitment, your compassion, your love and dedication had no bounds. We all witnessed it. It was the greatest gift you could give him, partly as you have shared with me, and thanks for all that he gave you. Yes, the most important person in your life. He was your partner from a chance meeting when Guy was on an ambitious speaking tour across Germany and the Netherlands, lecturing on the image of Germany in contemporary American literature, among other things. And when in Minden you happened to be in attendance, Guy noticed you during the lecture. Seemed he directed much of his address in your direction. And from there, a relaxing evening of Prosecco on the event sponsor's back porch, where fortunately you had been invited as well. And the entire evening was monopolized by your conversation with one another. And so it began a long-distance relationship to finally your marriage in 2006. Your relationship was like no other, the constant intellectual exchange, your partner with whom you could converse and discuss for 5 to 6 hours straight. He learned so much from you, and yes, you from him. You laughed together often. The wit, the banter, back and forth, always in German, you spoke so naturally. What blessings were appreciated together. Annual trips to Stratford, opera, classical music, your time at Temple Shir Shalom, sitting together around holiday tables. I fondly remember a number of Passover Seders in which we shared, watching the two of you quietly conversing in German and smiling, soaking it all in around you together. I know even with the challenges of the past couple years, you will miss him greatly. Your dedication to him, your care for him was a commitment, not merely because of your love, but also that he could do what was so important to him, the work that was always his legacy. Because his life in regard to what he went through was so important to you as well, and how he fought for what was good, for altruism, and truly believed in it. And the ability to fight for and support something of a greater cause, it added to your purpose, your love, and made being with him an honor you embraced. Guy knew that his life was a blessing. I believe his work, what he did tirelessly, was him reminding himself of that reality. He carried the spirits and the memories of those whose lives were cut short, those of his own family, but really all of those lost in the Holocaust. And made sure to do more than just make the most of his days, of his years, but to shine the light of hope in our world, of goodness and of kindness. Despite what we might see around us, to know we have a mission to bring light into this darkness. Susanna, I know in your banter with Guy, you joked about when would be an appropriate time to die, in what season. And spring, you would decide, made the most sense, or so it seemed, with the newness of life and the budding of flowers and the sun shining bright. Maybe that's why we gathered today, just weeks away from our spring. I know it doesn't feel like that, but still. But I think, as often was the case, Guy knew what would be best to tell his story. And from now on, for me personally, and I imagine now many of us, when we kindle the lights of Hanukkah each year, and we bring a little more light into our world, we will most definitely be thinking of Guy Stern. And the hope and the miracle of this holiday will forever be connected to the hope and the miracle that truly was his life. And we will know that he is still very much a part of who we are, of our lives, and what we do. And the goodness we'll fight for and continue to bring into our days. And we know his name will be for a blessing. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi, for your very heartfelt words. As we all know, Guy was a magnet for people wherever he went. At age 15, he came to America and he attended high school in St. Louis. There he met his first girlfriend, Ida Mae Schwartzberg. She said to him, "Günther, if you want to be successful in America, you will have to change your name." So she took the first two letters of Günther, she added a Y, and he became the Guy that we all knew and loved. Please look at the screen. Historian Michael Berenbaum will share stories of their lifelong friendship.
I'm honored to participate in this memorial to Guy Stern of blessed memory. When a person lives to 101 and has a full and wonderful life, at least the last 70 years of his life, one can only celebrate his life, even as we are diminished by his absence. Let me do three very basic things. First of all, talk about, I've known Guy for the past 55 years. We participated in Holocaust conferences and in meetings at a time when the number of scholars participating in Holocaust conference could fill a small conference room. And Guy was one of the very few at the very beginning who took the approach of looking at the Holocaust from the perspective of literature. I had the honor of interviewing Guy for his 99th birthday when we celebrated his 100th birthday. And my first question in the pre-interview is, tell me something, who has the audacity, the chutzpah, to wait till the 99th birthday to write an autobiography? And his response was that my wife finally convinced me that I had fewer tomorrows than I did yesterday. And I read his autobiography in enormous detail. And what I marveled at was his sense of detail, but also sense of humor. And I thought his sense of humor came out most particularly when he was doing the interrogation of Nuremberg for the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals. One of the incredible scenes there is when he pretended to be a Soviet officer as a prisoner, was not talking to the Americans, came in a Soviet uniform and essentially said, I'm going to take him, he'll come with me, and we'll teach him how to talk, to sing like a bird. And essentially, the Nazis were deeply afraid of the Russians, much more mild-mannered with regard to the Americans. He also interviewed, interrogated is the proper word. He interrogated a German general who had lived in the building next door to him, and asked, without indicating how he knew it, asked about all sorts of people who lived in that building. German general went back to his cell and said, you know, these Americans have such an incredible intelligence network. He knew everybody who lived in my building. There's nothing we can hide from them. Never realizing that Guy Stern had been a young child at that point who had played in the street with these boys and perhaps girls. So one has to appreciate Guy Stern as a scholar. One has to appreciate him as an educational leader. And let me tell you something that I heard in the last weeks of a literary giant, Lawrence Langer, who just passed away last month. Larry was talking about how he was grateful to Guy for giving him his start in his publishing career. He had submitted a book to Harvard University Press called The Holocaust and Literary Imagination. Irving Howe had reviewed the book and had really turned it down. And Larry Langer was distraught. Turned out, after having read the letter that Howe had written, that Howe had not read any of the European novels that were central to Larry Langer's work. He then submitted it to Yale University Press. Yale University Press sent it out to be reviewed by Guy Stern. Guy Stern had, and this is way back in the 70s, Guy Stern had, that was about 50 years ago, Guy Stern had read each of those novels, convinced Yale University Press to publish the book. The book won the National Book Award, and all because of Guy's great expertise in the literature, great concern, meticulous care. And Larry Langer said, I owe my career, I owe my publishing career to the fact that Guy Stern had done his homework and did everything that was required to successfully review a book for publication, prior to publication. Guy had an afterlife after his long career, and that was his afterlife became the Holocaust Museum in Michigan. And he loved his work there, felt very much at home there, and felt that it gave him a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, and a sense of accomplishment and achievement that lasted well into his 10th decade. I was invited to speak at an afternoon in his honor, probably I'd have to say about 7 or 8 years ago, before, as my daughter was applying to colleges and going to the university, being interviewed by the University of Michigan. And that was when Guy was retiring from his retirement as acting director of the museum. And once again, I saw the sparkle in his eyes, the sense of purpose and the sense of dignity and the sense of joy. Some people who study this field end up with a sense of melancholy. Guy ended up, from his entire experience, with a zest and a passion for life, as if he was going to say, let me kick death out of my life and live life to the fullest. And I will remember him for that and cherish him for that. We are diminished by his absence as we were blessed by his presence. Thank you.
My husband and I had dinner with Michael Berenbaum, his daughter, and Guy that night that was mentioned. It was such an honor to be in Oak Park in a little restaurant and to be in the presence of these two world scholars. Author Bruce Henderson and Guy developed a very special relationship in recent years. Bruce is in San Francisco and sends greetings to all of you. Please listen to his tribute.
My name is Bruce Henderson. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today about Guy. Guy and I met 10 years ago as a result of a newspaper obituary. I read about a man in his 90s who, as a young boy, was sent out of Nazi Germany in the 1930s by his Jewish family and came to the U.S. And when war broke out, he was trained by the U.S. Army as a German language translator and interpreter and served in World War II Europe with an outfit called the Ritchie Boys. I had written a number of World War II books, but I had never heard of the Ritchie Boys. I wanted to know more. So Guy was my first Ritchie boy. When I called him from my home in California, he invited me to come to Michigan. I thought I would stay a couple of days. I stayed more than a week. By the time I left, not only had I made a dear new friend in Guy, but he had also opened up the world of the Ritchie Boys to me, with names of other Ritchie Boys for me to reach out to, like Victor Brombert, Stefan Louis, Manny Steinfeld. This started me on a 3-year journey to write my book, Sons and Soldiers, the untold story of the Jews who escaped the Nazis and returned with the U.S. Army to fight Hitler, which became a New York Times bestseller. To know Guy was to love him, and you quickly learned you had to share him with the world. Dear Susanna knows this better than anyone. Guy was the most global person I ever knew. That meant not only did he travel freely among diverse circles of people, but in different countries and on different continents, always with a sharp wit, keen intelligence, and the biggest darn smile. I'd like to share some of Guy's words from his memoir, Invisible Ink. In explaining how he settled on that title, he returns us to the year 1933, when the Nazis came to power in Germany. He writes, quote, "With the bitter news that a dictator and demagogue was going to lead our native land, my father, rarely given to formal speeches, addressed his small family. An almost incurable optimist, he was neither despairing nor Pollyannish. We will be facing hard times, he said. During the next few years, it will be imperative we don't call attention to ourselves. We must all resemble invisible ink. Stay hidden until we can emerge again and show ourselves as the individuals we are." I followed his advice all through the years of Nazi rules, even after I entered the United States. You see, once you have drawn a cloak of invisibility around yourself, it becomes tough to divest yourself of it. The process proceeded in stages, Guy tells us, arriving in America, having good teachers, his time in the Army, and becoming a teacher himself. The final stage, he says, was writing his autobiography, quote, "which leaves no room for reticence. Thus it is fitting that it sails beneath my father's injunction to his family, and with the hope that future generations don't have to suffer the kind of tyranny that makes it necessary for us to be like invisible ink." End quote. Thank you, Guy, for your words. Thank you for leaving us with hope and with the memory of your smile.
The Ritchie boys are credited with securing more than 60% of the intelligence gathered in Europe in World War II. Guy rose to the rank of Master Sergeant in the Army and was decorated with a Bronze Star for his innovative methods of extracting information from German prisoners of war. 100-year-old Victor Brombert, a fellow Ritchie boy and a retired professor of Romance languages and literature at Princeton, was a close friend of Guy's. They shared much together over the years. Please look at the screen to see Victor's words of respect and admiration for his dear friend.
I try to evoke the image of Guy Stern on the screen of my memory or on the photographs. What I see above all is a broad, warm smile. It is a smile that indicated friendly thoughts, but more than that, friendship and warmth, a smile that was candid. But yes, it was in a sense also deceptively candid. For Guy was a complicated person. He was to some extent acting. He was imaginative, as was shown also by his work as a Ritchie boy, when he played the Soviet Commissar Khrushchev also. And all this, to some extent, in my memory, is related to the Ritchie experience and to the war and to Hildesheim, because it is in Hildesheim where he lived and where he returned, but also it is there that the extraordinary documentary film by Christian Bauer took birth. For it seems to me that I record that Guy and Christian Bauer, the filmmaker, his mother, went to school together. And this is where the film, this extraordinary documentary that made the expression Ritchie boy so popular, took place. And this is how I came into the act, because I think Guy Stern, who knew me or knew of me as a colleague in academia, recommended that I participate in the documentary. And this is how I got involved. Guy was a life force. He was a forceful person. In fact, he was given to physical exercise. But also, I think deep down, he was a sad person. Sad ever since his separation from his family, and a sense that he was unable to help them come to the United States, and that they were the victims of the Shoah. I prefer the word Shoah to the word Holocaust. And so it was the separation and also the memory of the war that I think had such an influence on him and made him such a complicated person. At the same time, this broad smile, this wonderful smile, and the underlying sadness, the underlying awareness. So I salute you, Richie boy. I salute you.
As we all know, Guy was a proud American and very proud to be a veteran of World War II. He loved the camaraderie, the patriotism, and always was wearing his favorite hats, marking his service. These were some of Guy's most proud moments. We appreciate that the Jewish war veterans are with us this morning to salute their dear friend. Retired Second Lieutenant of the U.S. Army, Don Shank, will speak on behalf of all of the Jewish war veterans. Don?
I'm sorry, but I have to correct something. I'm a retired brigadier general now. It's a long time ago since I've been a second lieutenant. But thank you anyway. My name is Don Shank. I'm the commander of the Second Lieutenant Raymond Zussman Post 135 of the Jewish War Veterans. Ray Zussman is a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, and we're very, very proud to bear his name in all that we do. I'm a soldier, just like Guy was a soldier. My first contact with Guy Stern was in this building in the spring of 2018. Later that year, at the annual Stories of Service event held at the University of Michigan during their annual Veterans Week celebration, I had the opportunity to listen to Guy talk about his experiences. And I actually saw him go directly into character as Commissar Kirchhoff. That was quite a feat to observe. After seeing that, I must tell you that I was hooked on Günther Stern and hooked on his entire life, and I had to learn more about it. So I sought out Bruce Henderson's book. I studied Sons and Soldiers, and I learned as much as I could. Knowing that he and I were in the same post of the Jewish war veterans was a very, very special bond. Seeing him in 60 Minutes brought him directly into my living room with my family. In 2019, he honored me by giving me the opportunity to review and comment on his book, Invisible Ink, prior to its publication. My name is just like Bruce Henderson's on the dust cover of that book as a reviewer. His life's passions were evident in all that he did. His time as an educator at Wayne State University and many, many other universities. his dedication to the Institute for the Righteous, his scholarly work, whether it be journals, articles, or books, all of these are Guy Stern, the educator. In this building in the summer of 2021, Representative Alyssa Slotkin met with a group of Jewish war veterans. She wanted specifically to meet this man about whom she had heard so much. And after she told us all about what was going on in Congress and her work in the department, in the Committee on Veterans Affairs and various other committees, she opened it up for questions. And the very first question Guy asked of her was not so much a question as a command. Make sure you protect veterans and the GI Bill, and make sure that veterans everywhere are paid their due from their nation. I can tell you that Representative Slotkin was taking notes. Last year, on the eve of his 101st birthday, I, along with several others, were given the honor to help in the dedication of the Guy Stern Welcome Center at the VA Ann Arbor Medical Center. In those remarks, I described how, as a young captain, I was probably the only person in the room that, other than Guy, that had ever been to Fort Ritchie. Camp Ritchie, as it was called when he was there, but I had actually been there in the 1980s. But in my remarks, I made note of the fact that there was no more fitting place to bear his name as a welcome center than that hospital, that medical center that he loved so much and took such great care of him. And now every veteran, every family member, every member of the administration and staff, all the physicians, when they walk in that building, the very, very first thing they see is Günther Stern's smile. And it lights the room, and it lights their day. I account myself blessed for having known Susanna Stern and for having known Guy Stern. And I think it only fitting that I share in conclusion some very prescient remarks that were written 80 years ago as a part of Guy's formal evaluation when he left Camp Ritchie, about to become a staff sergeant in the United States Army. His first that evaluation report said, among other things, he was quiet, unassuming, theatrical, and most importantly, quite intelligent. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Don. That was very meaningful and personal. Guy was a lifelong learner with endless curiosity, a critical thinker, and a most beloved professor. Dr. Steffi Hartwell, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Wayne State University, will now bring us greetings. Dr. Hartwell.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see so many present to celebrate the life and honor the memory of distinguished professor of German, Guy Stern. My name is Steffi Hartwell, and I'm honored to bring the greetings from Wayne State University in Midtown Detroit, where I'm Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Guy Stern spent almost 3 decades as a professor of German in our college after serving as Wayne State University's provost. I'm here on behalf of the generations of students who are inspired by Dr. Stern throughout his storied career and the countless colleagues, scholars, and friends at Wayne State and worldwide who cherish his memory. Guy Stern was an exceptional teacher, a beloved mentor, and an impressive leader, and a distinguished scholar as well as an American hero in his World War II role as a Ritchie boy. Guy was most certainly in a class by himself. He was exemplary in all his academic and professional pursuits. At Wayne State, during his decades-long teaching career, he was a professor who was adored by his students. Guy was rightfully proud of his myriad of scholarly accomplishments and his founding and nurturing of numerous professional organizations, including Wayne State's Academy of Scholars, founded in 1979. Its main purpose was to raise the scholarly prestige of Wayne State by creating a community of the most celebrated researchers and scholars at the university. Guy was, however, most proud of his lasting effects in the classroom. His students appreciated, beyond measure, his broad and deep knowledge of all things, especially German literature, his utterly engaging teaching style, his wonderful sense of humor, and his devotion to his students. After Guy retired, he continued his warm relationship with colleagues at Wayne State, including continuing his work in his office at Manoogian Hall and attending department and university-sponsored events. He was always immensely grateful for and praised Wayne State, where he spent the majority of his career. We are, in turn, immensely grateful for and praise Professor Guy Stern, whose legacy will live on to the distant future. Now I'd like to introduce Professor Don Hasse, a professor emeritus at Wayne State in German and Guy's colleague, as well as one of Guy's former students.
Nearly my entire academic career, I had the good fortune and privilege to know Guy Stern as my teacher, colleague, and friend. To say I'm grateful for that is hardly enough. It was a remarkable thing to come to the Wayne State campus every day, and distinguished Professor Guy Stern was there every day, and experience Guy's good humor and wit, his keen intelligence and encyclopedic knowledge, his kindness and generosity, his devotion to teaching, and his endless energy and purpose, above all, his purpose. Those years have given me many memories, but the most meaningful memory I have of Guy predates our time at Wayne State. I first came face to face with Guy Stern in 1968 when I walked into the classroom of my very first college class at the University of Cincinnati, an introduction to German literature that he was teaching. I was uncertain whether I was getting in over my head or not with only 4 years of high school German under my belt. So I approached him and spoke my first words to him. I'm not sure I'm in the right place. He assured me I was, and he was right about that. In his classroom, in his sphere of influence, I was in exactly the right place. Guy was always making a difference in the lives of students and colleagues. For me, the moment came not simply when I walked into his classroom in September 1968, but a few weeks into the course. We were reading the works of German exile writers, and one day after class, he called me over. He put into my hands a book, Die Farm in den Grünen Bergen, The Farm in the Green Mountains, which Alice Herdan Zuckmayer had written about her exile years in Vermont. He told me I should read it. Nearly 4 decades later, when I mentioned this to him and pulled that very volume from his office shelf, Guy didn't remember, but I remembered. When he put that book into my hands, he was literally passing on a memory, giving a new generation the opportunity to learn about those who experienced exile in the Holocaust. He was, even then, passing on the torch, educating and enlisting others who would find their lives changed by what he gave to them, and who would themselves come to write and teach their own students about exile in the Holocaust, as I and others who learned from him have done. For this life-changing moment and for so much more, I'll always be grateful. Rest in peace, Guy.
Thank you for those beautiful words. Guy's love of fine literature, languages, and culture actually came from his parents, Hedwig and Julia Stern. At 6, they took him to the opera. His parents were very big theater goers, and they loved Kurt Weill. Young Günther pleaded with his parents to take him to see the Threepenny Opera when they went, but they refused because of the questionable language and that the story was not appropriate for a 6-year-old. And this was the beginning of Guy's love for Kurt Weill, which blasted throughout his entire life. We welcome to the screen Kim Kowalski, the president of the Kurt Weill Foundation for Music. Please watch. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kim Kowalski, and I'm president of the Kurt Weill Foundation for Music in New York City. In December 2021, just 4 weeks before his 100th birthday, the Board of Trustees of the Kurt Weill Foundation for Music elected Guy Stern its first and only lifetime trustee. Guy had joined the board in 1980 at the invitation of Weill's widow, Lotte Lenya. I joined at the same time, along with director Harold Prince and conductor Julius Rudel. But unlike the rest of us, Guy's relationship with Lenya and Weill had started 25 years earlier. In 1954, Guy, having just finished his PhD at Columbia, wrote her to ask if he could include some Weill correspondence in a reader intended for third-year German college students. She sent him several letters between Weill, Franz Werfel, and Max Reinhardt about a huge Jewish pageant conceived in 1933 as Der Weg der Verheißung, but premiered in New York in 1937 as The Eternal Road. That project sparked a series of collaborations and a lifelong friendship. Lenya commissioned Guy to make the English translations of Dreigroschenoper and Mahagoni for her landmark recordings. He convinced her to record a collection of German poetry for classroom use. They made a trip to Germany together. She attended the bar mitzvah of Guy's son. Her last public performance in 1980 was in Detroit, climaxing a Weill evening that Guy had organized at Wayne State. Guy recalled in his autobiography, Invisible Ink, that the letters Lenya had provided him would eventually become a leitmotif in his own scholarly work. In 1983, his first scholarly paper on the topic was entitled, aptly, The Road to the Eternal Road. Guy's continuing scholarship, intensive advocacy, and international diplomacy for the work culminated in its first stage production since 1937. It was presented in Chemnitz to celebrate the centenary of Weill's birth in 2000. Then the international co-production traveled to the Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York, the New Israeli Opera, Opera Krakow, and Expo 2000 in Hanover, before being broadcast on German television. Meanwhile, Guy had also been the spark plug for the first German Weill Music Festival symposium and exhibition in a reunified Germany in 1990. Several years later, he proposed and then helped to found a Kurt Weill Festival in Weill's hometown of Dessau that is now an annual 3-week event. As a transplanted German-born American citizen, like Weill was, Guy was uniquely qualified to mentor all of us at the Kurt Weill Foundation. His wisdom enhanced our discussions as much as his wit enlivened them. His passion for Weill's music and his deep friendship with Lenya informed these efforts, which in turn inspired all of us who were privileged to work with him. We miss him greatly, but will long treasure his memory.
How many people make new friends at age 96? For the final chapter of his life, Guy began each day at the Jewish Community Center in West Bloomfield at 5:30 a.m. for a swim and exercises. He then drove his Honda Civic to work at the Holocaust Center, often 6 mornings a week. It was an extraordinary experience for our director, Rabbi Ali Meyerfeld, and for all of our colleagues. He was the oldest person that most of us had ever met. Mark Mulder, or as Guy would say, young Mulder, will speak on behalf of all of our staff. Mark?
Thank you, Cheryl. My friendship with Guy is one of many stories that anyone who knew him would have, especially if you worked here with him at the Holocaust Center. And the funny thing is, I don't really remember meeting Guy for the first time. You would think that as a 36-year-old meeting a 90-year-old colleague would stand out, but somehow it didn't. And that maybe tells you just how much that Guy was a part of this place, and that he was a part of the staff, that it felt perfectly normal. I feel him everywhere I go here and with everything I do. I used to spend a lot of time with Guy. Often it was to help him with some problem he was having with his computer. And he would remind me if he thought that I was taking too long or maybe not explaining everything I was doing, that he had training in getting information from people. Other times I would go to him just because I wanted to talk to him and maybe hear a story. He would talk about politics, music, history. With me, thankfully, European soccer, as referenced by the rabbi. And he could tell, and we could tell as a staff, that he liked and admired us as much as we liked and admired him. His influence on me as a curator has been profound. His motivation and passion for studying altruism and Jews who rescued Jews during the Holocaust was a consistent and constant reminder to me that we need to center and focus on Jewish experiences and Jewish voices when we discuss the Holocaust here at the museum. With all due respect to all the staff here, Guy was the best colleague to talk about or introduce visitors to. It's kind of difficult to beat a scholar of his caliber who also happens to be a war hero, one who can tell you first-person stories about the day Hitler came to power, but also have you laughing about his antics during the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. He would talk about nearly any subject you could think of and would tell incredible stories about his life at lunch. And he would tell these stories like how he wrote his PhD thesis in a single year with an almost shocking level of humility and self-deprecation. And it was that humility that made those stories seem so relatable, even if they were anything but in substance. And they drew us to him. He never put himself above others. He made sure everyone felt unique, no matter what your role here was or how young or old you were. All of this today seems like it's not even the surface of the person we all cared so much for. There's no way we could summarize him in a single hour. So I'll leave you with this. Guy led by example, and he made you want to be better. When I talk about memorials and remembrance, I often say that remembering is not enough, that you should be changed, that you should seek to be better. So my final words are to be better like Guy, and to take the lessons that we've learned today by talking about him and our memory of him and apply them to your lives, and to be a little bit more like Guy. Thank you.
Mark, that was beautiful. Thank you for speaking on behalf of all of us. This past week, the Army ROTC cadets from Central Michigan University and Ferris State University gathered on Utah Beach at Normandy. Guy was there at D-Day +3. Our colleague at the Holocaust Center, Jamie Wise, who just returned back, joined the group, and she taught them all about Guy. And together they honored Guy by reading from his book, Invisible Ink. Our final words will be from Guy's beloved wife, Susanna. This will be followed by the recessional of the Jewish war veterans. Please remain in your seats for the recessional. Then there will be recordings of Guy's favorite music and a reception in the craft lobby. Artifacts from Guy's collections will also be on display. Please stay and enjoy Guy's favorite dessert, key lime pie, and share your stories and your memories of Guy together. And now, Susanna.
Good morning in the US, good afternoon in Europe. Even though Guy has died, 5 weeks shy of his 102nd birthday, today he is here. He is with us, with me, his wife, with his friends, with his dear colleagues and other veterans. And you know what has brought him back just for this hour on a Sunday morning? Love. So many people in person, at their screens, in the US, in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, France, and the UK. We all came together today to focus on our love and respect for Guy. We came together to share the feeling of gratitude to have been part of his long and productive life. I say a hearty thank you to all who are in attendance today, to all the speakers, some of them from different institutions Guy was deeply connected with for many decades, and especially to the host of today's event, the Zeckelman Holocaust Center. Thank you to all of you who took the time to honor Guy. His memory will always be a blessing to all who knew and loved him. As most of you know, Guy is buried in the Great Lakes National Cemetery in Holly, a veterans cemetery. The interest and fame that came along over the years with the public awareness of the Ritchie boys strengthened his bond to other veterans, in addition to the medical help Guy got from the Veterans Administration, especially the VA hospital in Ann Arbor. These were his buddies. There he felt understood. All of this caused him to make his decision to be buried in a veterans cemetery. I had to make a decision on what should be written on his gravestone. There was little space for an inscription. Of course, he was a beloved husband 3 times and a beloved father until his son Mark died in 2006. He was a scholar and a friend to so many at home and across the world. But I wanted to document his essence, so I chose Shoah survivor, Ritchie boy. He made a difference. And Guy really did make a difference in many people's lives. Up to his last years of life, he received thank you letters, either from former students or even from former students who had become professors of German studies themselves. They wanted to express their gratitude and inform Guy, who was still working, that they had retired. Now Guy is in Holly. I assume that he would have preferred Hollywood, but today he is among us. I see him with a big smile on his face, happy and proud that we came together to honor him. He looks ageless and sweet as always, and he wears his favorite pink jacket. And he says, I exceeded my expiration date by more than 20 years. I was able to work until I was 100 years old. Don't be sad that I'm gone. Rather, be joyful that I was with you for such a long time. Thank you.